At her engagement party, she overheard her fiancé and stepsister plotting to steal everything. In a rage, she stormed out and married the first homeless man she saw on the street. What she didn't know was that her new husband was the most feared mafia boss in the city, and he'd been waiting his whole life for someone worth protecting. The champagne glass slipped from Alina Carter's fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom. But the sound was nothing compared to the words that had just shattered her world. "God, she's so naive," her fiancé Marcus whispered from behind the closed door of the bridal suite. "Does she really think I'd marry her for love? It's all about Daddy's construction empire, baby." Alina pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the crack in the door, she could see Marcus pulling her stepsister Emma into his arms. "What about the wedding tomorrow?" Emma purred, running her manicured fingers down Marcus's chest. "All those people, all that money spent." Marcus laughed coldly. "We'll go through with it. Once I'm legally her husband, I'll have access to everything. Then we can be together openly. She'll be so broken by then, she won't even fight the divorce." "Poor little Alina," Emma giggled. "Daddy's perfect princess, about to lose everything. If only she knew that I've been feeding you information about Carter Construction's deals for months." The blood drained from Alina's face. The failed contracts, the mysterious bidding losses, the near bankruptcy that had forced her father to consider Marcus's generous investment offer, it had all been orchestrated. "You're brilliant, Emma. By the time I'm done, the Carter fortune will be ours, and sweet little Alina will be left with nothing but debt and heartbreak." Alina stumbled backward, her designer heels clicking against the floor. 200 guests were celebrating downstairs, toasting her fairy tale engagement to Marcus Wellington, the charming heir to a pharmaceutical fortune. Her father had been so proud, so relieved that his daughter had found someone who could help save their failing business. All lies. Every kiss, every "I love you," every promise of forever. All calculated moves in a game she didn't even know she was playing. She looked down at the ridiculously expensive engagement ring on her finger, a 5-carat diamond that Marcus had proposed with just 3 months ago. Had Emma helped him pick it out? Had they laughed about how easily she'd fallen for their act? Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend Sarah. "You look so happy tonight. Can't wait for the wedding tomorrow." Tomorrow. In 18 hours, she was supposed to walk down the aisle and promise her life to a man who saw her as nothing more than a stepping stone to her family's money. Rage bubbled up in her chest, hot and fierce. Alina Carter had never been the type to take betrayal lying down. She'd fought her way through Harvard Business School, had turned around 3 failing companies before her 25th birthday, and had earned every ounce of respect in a male-dominated industry. She wasn't about to let 2 scheming sociopaths destroy everything her family had built. But first, she needed to get out of here before she did something that would land her in jail. Alina kicked off her heels and grabbed them in one hand, hiking up her silk engagement dress with the other. She slipped down the back staircase, her heart pounding as she heard Marcus's voice echoing from the ballroom. "Has anyone seen my beautiful fiancé? We need to practice our first dance." The nerve of that bastard. She burst through the hotel's side exit into the cool Chicago night, the October air biting against her bare arms. The street was surprisingly busy for 11 p.m., with taxis honking and people stumbling out of nearby bars. The bright city lights blurred through her angry tears. "Alina!" She heard Marcus's voice behind her, probably having noticed her absence. "Where are you going, sweetheart?" She ran faster, her bare feet slapping against the cold pavement. She turned the corner onto State Street, gasping for breath, her lungs burning from a combination of rage and exertion. "I'll show them," she whispered fiercely to herself. "I'll show them both." She stopped in front of a 24-hour convenience store, doubles over to catch her breath. That's when she saw him. A man leaned against a brick wall, smoking a cigarette. His clothes were torn and dirty, his dark hair unkempt, and his face bore the weathered look of someone who'd spent too many nights on the street. He was probably in his early 30s, with sharp cheekbones and intense dark eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. A beggar. A homeless man. The complete opposite of Marcus Wellington with his perfectly pressed suits and fake charm. Perfect. I'll marry the first man I see before I let them ruin me, Alina declared to the night sky, her voice echoing off the buildings. The man's eyes snapped to hers. He dropped his cigarette and stepped forward, studying her face with surprising intensity. Then marry me, he said simply, his voice rough but strangely commanding. Alina stared at him, her chest still heaving from her run. What? You said you'd marry the first man you saw, he gestured to himself with a slight smirk. Here I am. There was something about his eyes. They didn't look like a typical homeless person's eyes. They were alert, calculating, almost predatory. But right now, Alina didn't care about anything except proving that she wouldn't be anyone's victim. Fine, she said, surprising herself with her firmness. Let's do it. His eyebrows rose slightly. You're serious? Dead serious. There's a courthouse that does 24-hour ceremonies about 6 blocks from here. I know because I looked it up when I was planning she paused, her voice catching, my other wedding. The man studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Dominic, he said, extending a dirt-stained hand. Alina, she shook it, noticing that despite his appearance, his grip was strong and confident. 20 minutes later, they stood in a sterile courthouse office in front of a bored-looking justice of the peace who'd clearly seen stranger things than a society princess marrying a homeless man at midnight. Do you, Alina Carter, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Alina looked at Dominic, this stranger who'd agreed to her insane proposal without question. His dark eyes held hers steadily, and for a moment, she wondered what his story was. But then she heard Marcus's voice in her head again. Poor little Alina, and her resolve hardened. I do. And, do you, Dominic? The justice looked at his paperwork. Russo. Dominic supplied smoothly. Dominic Russo, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife. I do. By the power vested in me by the state of Illinois, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Dominic stepped closer, his hands gently framing her face. His touch was surprisingly gentle for someone with such calloused hands. When he kissed her, it was soft, brief, but something electric passed between them that made Alina's breath catch. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Russo, the justice said, already reaching for the next file on his desk. As they walked out of the courthouse, marriage certificate in hand, Alina pulled out her phone. Her fingers were shaking, but her resolve was iron strong. She took a selfie with Dominic, both of them holding the marriage certificate, and posted it to every social media platform she had. Change of plans. Just married the love of my life. Sorry, Marcus, but the wedding's off. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag true love, hashtag Mrs. Russo. Her phone immediately exploded with notifications. Calls, texts, comments. All of them shocked, confused, some angry. But the one that made her smile was from Marcus. What the hell did you do? She turned her phone off and looked at her new husband. Well, Mr. Russo, I hope you're ready for an adventure. Dominic's lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, but there was something almost admiring in his expression. Mrs. Russo, I have a feeling you have no idea what you've just gotten yourself into. As they walked into the Chicago night, neither of them could have predicted that this impulsive decision would change both of their lives forever, and that the real games were just beginning. The taxi dropped them off in front of a crumbling apartment building on the south side of Chicago. Alina stared up at the peeling paint and broken windows, reality hitting her like a cold slap. What had she done? This is home, Dominic said simply, fishing a key from his torn jacket pocket. Alina followed him up 3 flights of creaking stairs, her silk engagement dress catching on splinters in the wooden banister. The hallway smelled like cigarettes and something she didn't want to identify. From behind thin walls came the sounds of crying babies, arguing couples, and a television turned up too loud. It's not the Ritz, Dominic said, unlocking a door marked 3B. But it's clean. The apartment was tiny, maybe 500 square feet total. A small living room with a sagging couch, a kitchenette with outdated appliances, and what looked like one bedroom. But Dominic was right. Despite the worn furniture and faded wallpaper, everything was spotless. "You can have the bedroom," he said, tossing his keys onto a scratched coffee table. "I'll take the couch." Alina stood in the middle of the room, still holding her heels, feeling completely out of place in her designer dress. 3 hours ago, she'd been at her engagement party in a 5-star hotel. Now she was married to a homeless man in a rundown apartment on the wrong side of town. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why what? Why did you agree to marry me? A complete stranger having a breakdown in the street?" Dominic studied her face for a moment. "You look like someone who needed an escape route. I figured we could help each other." "Help each other how?" "No offense, but what exactly can you offer me?" Something flickered in his dark eyes. Amusement, maybe, or something sharper. "Protection. A place to stay while you figure out your next move. And most importantly, a way to disappear from whatever you were running from."
He was right about that.
By now, her phone was probably buzzing nonstop with calls from Marcus, her father, wedding guests, reporters. The Carter family drama was probably already hitting the society pages. "I should call my dad," she said, sinking onto the couch. "He's probably worried sick." "Tomorrow," Dominic suggested. "Let tonight be yours." Alina looked at this stranger, her husband, who seemed remarkably calm for someone who'd just married a woman he'd met 20 minutes ago. There was something about his stillness that was almost unsettling. Most people would be asking questions, wanting to know her story, but Dominic just watched her with those intense dark eyes. "I should probably explain what you've gotten yourself into," she said. "My ex-fiancé and my stepsister have been plotting to steal my family's construction company. The wedding tomorrow was supposed to be the final step in their plan." "Was?" Dominic raised an eyebrow. "Well, it's hard to marry someone when the bride has already married someone else." For the first time since overhearing Marcus and Emma, Alina felt a spark of satisfaction. "They probably think I've lost my mind. Have you?" The question was asked so seriously that Alina had to think about it. "Maybe. Probably. But I'd rather be crazy than be their victim." Dominic nodded approvingly. Smart woman. Smart woman who just married a complete stranger and is now sitting in his apartment in a dress that costs more than most people's rent, she laughed, but it sounded slightly hysterical even to her own ears. "You can stay as long as you need," Dominic said. "No strings attached. When you're ready to move on with your life, just say the word. And what do you get out of this arrangement?" Again, that flicker of something unreadable in his expression. "Maybe I like the idea of helping someone stick it to the people who wrong them." Alina studied his face, trying to read him. There was something about Dominic that didn't quite fit the homeless man image. His posture was too confident, his speech too articulate, his movements too controlled. But then again, she'd learned tonight that she was terrible at reading people. "I'm going to rebuild everything they tried to take from me," she said firmly. "My family's company, my reputation, my life. And I'm going to make them pay for what they did." "Good," Dominic said, and there was something almost predatory in his smile. "Revenge is best served cold." As Alina settled into the small bedroom later, changing out of her engagement dress and into an oversized t-shirt Dominic had found for her, she heard quiet voices in the hallway outside the apartment. She pressed her ear to the door but couldn't make out the words, just low, urgent tones, and what sounded like Dominic giving instructions. Probably other residents complaining about the noise, she told herself. Or maybe someone asking about his new wife. What she didn't see was Dominic speaking quietly into a cell phone that definitely didn't match his homeless persona, or the two men in dark suits who took up positions at either end of the hallway. She didn't notice the expensive security camera that was discreetly installed in the stairwell, or the way the building's other residents suddenly seemed to find reasons to be elsewhere. "Yes, sir," one of the suited men said into his earpiece. "The package is secure. Perimeter established." "Good," came the reply. "No one gets to her without going through us first. The boss wants her protected at all costs." In the apartment, Dominic stood at the window, looking down at the street below. 3 more of his men had taken positions around the building, invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for, but forming an impenetrable protective circle around the woman now sleeping in his bed. Alina Carter thought she'd married a homeless man to spite her cheating ex-fiancé. She had no idea she'd just become the most protected woman in Chicago, or that her new husband was the one man in the city that both her enemies and his would kill to get to. But first, she needed to believe the illusion. Dominic had worked too hard building his cover to blow it now, especially not for a woman who'd stumbled into his world by accident. Even if something about her fierce determination and fearless spirit intrigued him more than it should. He pulled the curtains closed and settled onto the couch, but sleep didn't come easily. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he had a feeling that protecting Alina Carter was going to be far more complicated than he'd anticipated. In the bedroom, Alina stared at the ceiling, wondering what she'd gotten herself into, and why, despite everything, she felt safer in this stranger's apartment than she had in months. Neither of them knew that their real test was just beginning. By morning, Alina's impromptu wedding was front-page news on every Chicago gossip blog and society website. Her phone, which she'd finally turned back on, had 247 missed calls and over 500 text messages. Carter heiress marries homeless man in midnight ceremony, read the headline of Chicago's social scene. Below it was the selfie she'd posted, blown up and analyzed like evidence in a crime scene. Jesus, she muttered, scrolling through increasingly frantic messages from friends, business associates, and reporters. Her father had called 18 times. "Morning, Mrs. Russo," Dominic said from the kitchenette, pouring coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. He looked different in daylight, still rough around the edges, but there was something almost elegant about the way he moved. "The whole city thinks I've lost my mind," Alina said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "My assistant texted that there are reporters camped outside my apartment building and my office. Probably not the best places for you right now," Dominic agreed calmly. Before Alina could respond, there was a knock at the door. Her blood ran cold. Had the reporters found her already? Dominic moved to the window and peered through the blinds. His expression darkened. "It's a man in an expensive suit. Blonde hair, looks like he thinks he owns the world." "Marcus," Alina whispered. "How did he find me?" "Marriage licenses are public record. He probably had someone track down my address." Dominic's voice had taken on a harder edge. "What do you want to do?" The knocking became more insistent. "Alina, I know you're in there. We need to talk." "I should face him," she said, standing up straighter. "I can't hide forever." Dominic studied her face, then nodded. "I'll be right here." When Alina opened the door, Marcus pushed past her into the apartment, his perfectly styled hair slightly mussed and his usually pristine suit wrinkled. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Thank God," he said, reaching for her hands. "Alina, baby, what have you done?" "I got married," she said coldly, pulling away from his touch. "Just like we planned, except to someone else." Marcus's blue eyes flicked to Dominic, who stood silently by the kitchen, and his expression shifted from concern to barely concealed disgust. "This is insane," Marcus said, turning back to Alina. "You are obviously having some kind of breakdown. It's understandable. Wedding stress affects everyone differently. But we can fix this." "Fix what, exactly?" "We'll get the marriage annulled. Claim you were mentally incompetent, maybe drugged. No one will blame you for making a mistake under pressure." His voice took on the patronizing tone she'd once found charming, but now made her skin crawl. "Then we can have our real wedding, just like we planned." "You mean the wedding where you marry me for my money while screwing my stepsister behind my back?" Marcus's face went white, then red. "I don't know what you think you heard." "I heard everything, Marcus. Every disgusting, calculating word." Alina's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking with anger. "You and Emma can rot in hell." "Alina, please. Get out." Marcus's mask finally slipped completely. His handsome features twisted into something ugly and dangerous. You have no idea what you're doing. This man, he gestured at Dominic. You don't know anything about him. He could be dangerous. A criminal. He's probably just using you for your money, just like you think I was. The difference is, I know Dominic is using me. Alina lied smoothly. We have an arrangement. Unlike you, he's honest about his motivations. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. If you think I'm going to let some homeless piece of trash ruin everything I've worked for, you're more naive than I thought. Call off this ridiculous charade, Alina, before you get hurt. Is that a threat? Dominic's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He'd moved silently closer, and now he stood just behind Alina's shoulder. Marcus laughed, but there was nervousness in it. What are you going to do, tough guy? Beat me up? I'll have you arrested for assault. Try me, Dominic said quietly, and something in his tone made Marcus take an involuntary step backward. This isn't over, Marcus snarled, heading for the door. You'll regret this, Alina. Both of you will. After he left, Alina sank onto the couch, adrenaline making her dizzy. Well, that went better than expected. Did it? Dominic asked seriously. Because he just threatened you. Marcus is all talk. He's too much of a coward to actually. A brick crashed through the living room window, sending glass flying across the floor. Taped to it was a note. Divorce him or pay the price. Maybe not, Dominic said grimly. That was just the beginning. Over the next 3 days, strange things began happening. Alina noticed the same black sedan following her when she ventured out for groceries. Her phone started receiving calls from blocked numbers, sometimes heavy breathing, sometimes threats in disguised voices telling her to come to her senses and leave the bum. The apartment was broken into while they were out, though strangely, nothing seemed to be missing, just drawers pulled open and paper scattered, as if someone had been searching for something specific. We should call the police, Alina said, surveying the mess. And tell them what? That your ex-boyfriend is harassing you? They'll take a report and file it away. Dominic was cleaning up methodically, his movements controlled, but his eyes alert. Rich men like Marcus Wellington don't usually leave fingerprints. What Alina didn't know was that within hours of each incident, the threats mysteriously stopped. The man who'd thrown the brick was found beaten unconscious in an alley with no memory of who'd hired him. The black sedan that had been following her was found abandoned, its driver nowhere to be found. The apartment break-in was the last one, though not because the police had intervened. Late that night, as Alina finally fell into an exhausted sleep, Dominic stepped onto the fire escape. A man in a dark suit was waiting for him. The Wellington problem? The man asked quietly. Contained, Dominic replied. But he's getting desperate. That makes him dangerous. Should we eliminate him permanently? Dominic considered this. Not yet. Too much attention. But make it clear that any more threats against my wife will be his last mistake. Understood, sir. And the surveillance detail?
Double it.
I want to know if she so much as gets a dirty look from a stranger. As his man melted back into the shadows, Dominic looked through the window at Alina sleeping peacefully in his bed. She thought she was hiding from her problems in a rundown apartment with a homeless man. She had no idea she was sitting in the eye of a storm that was about to become much more dangerous. And she definitely had no idea that the man she'd married despite her ex-fiancé was the one person in Chicago who could actually protect her from the forces now gathering against them both. But keeping his identity secret was becoming harder by the day, especially when every protective instinct he possessed was screaming at him to tell her the truth. The real question was, when she finally learned who he really was, would she thank him or run screaming into the night? A week into their strange marriage, Dominic's behavior began to change in ways that made Alina increasingly uncomfortable. It started small. When she announced she was going to grab coffee from the shop down the street, he insisted on coming with her. When she wanted to visit her friend Sarah, he suggested they meet somewhere public instead. When she tried to return to her office to handle some business matters, he became adamant. It's not safe, he said firmly, blocking the apartment door. Those reporters are still swarming the building. And your ex-fiancé probably has people watching. Marcus isn't the Mafia, Dominic. Alina snapped, frustration boiling over. He's a pharmaceutical heir with anger management issues, not some criminal mastermind. Something flickered in Dominic's dark eyes, almost like amusement, but his expression remained serious. You don't know what desperate people are capable of. And you do. Yes, he said simply. I do. The way he said it sent a chill down her spine. There was something in his tone, something hard and experienced, that didn't match the homeless man narrative she'd constructed in her head. I need to work, Dominic. I have a company to save, contracts to review, meetings to take. I can't hide in this apartment forever. Then work from here. I'll get you a laptop, whatever you need. With what money? The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she immediately felt guilty. But the question had been nagging at her. Dominic dressed like he had nothing, lived in a rundown apartment, yet somehow had managed to keep them fed and comfortable all week. I'm sorry, that was honest, he finished. And you're right to ask. I have some savings. Odd jobs here and there. It was a non-answer, and they both knew it. That afternoon, while Dominic was out on one of his mysterious errands, Marcus called. Against her better judgment, Alina answered. I've been worried about you, he said, his voice carefully controlled. You haven't been seen in public for days. People are starting to talk. Let them talk. Alina, I know you hate me right now, and I understand why. What I did was wrong, and I'm sorry. But I'm concerned about your safety. My safety is fine, Marcus. Is it? When's the last time you left that apartment alone? When's the last time you made a decision without him hovering over your shoulder? Alina's grip tightened on the phone. What are you talking about? I've been asking around about your husband. Did you know he doesn't exist in any official records before 5 years ago? No employment history, no credit history, no school records. It's like he materialized out of thin air. People fall through the cracks all the time. Not like this. And the neighborhood he lives in? 3 people have gone missing from that building in the past year. 3 people who asked too many questions about the wrong things. Alina felt her blood turn cold. You're lying. I can send you the police reports. Alina, I think you're in danger. Real danger. Whatever game he's playing, whatever he's after, you need to get out of there. Even if that were true, why would you care? You made it clear that I'm just a means to an end for you. Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, more sincere than she'd heard it in months. Because despite everything, I do care about you. Maybe I lost sight of that. Maybe I let greed cloud my judgment, but I never wanted you to get hurt. After she hung up, Alina sat staring at her phone, Marcus's words echoing in her head. She tried to dismiss them as manipulation, but doubt had taken root. When Dominic returned, he was carrying groceries and wearing that same unreadable expression he'd worn all week. How was your errand? She asked carefully. Fine, he started putting away food, his movements efficient and controlled. You look upset. What happened? Marcus called. Dominic went very still. What did he want? To warn me about you. Actually, Alina watched his face for any reaction, but his expression remained neutral. He seems to think you're some kind of criminal. And what do you think? The question hung in the air between them. Alina studied her husband's face, the sharp cheekbones, the alert dark eyes, the way he moved like a predator even when he was doing something as mundane as putting away milk. I think I don't really know you at all, she said quietly. You knew enough to marry me. I married you to spite my ex-fiancé. That's hardly the foundation for trust and understanding. Dominic finished with the groceries and turned to face her fully. Are you regretting it? I don't know. Maybe, she took a deep breath. Dominic, I need some space. Some time to think without you watching my every move. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. It's not safe for you to be alone. Says who? You? The man who won't tell me anything about his past, who has no job but somehow has money, who lives in a building where people apparently disappear? Alina. No. She stood up, pacing to the window. I've spent months having my choices made for me by Marcus and Emma. I won't trade one controlling relationship for another. I'm trying to protect you. From what? And don't say your ex-fiancé, because we both know that's not the whole story. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, and Alina could see some internal struggle playing out behind his eyes. Finally, he spoke. You're right. There are things I can't tell you yet. But I need you to trust me. Trust you? I barely know you. You know enough. His voice was soft but firm. You know I haven't hurt you. You know I've kept you safe. You know I don't want anything from you except... Except what? He looked at her for a long moment, something vulnerable flickering in his dark eyes. Except the chance to prove that not every man in your life is going to betray you. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, but the doubt Marcus had planted was growing stronger. I need some air, she said, heading for the door. Alina, don't. I'm going for a walk around the block. Alone. If you try to stop me or follow me, I'll walk out of here and never come back. She saw him weigh his options, saw the moment he decided not to fight her on it. But as she left the apartment, she didn't see him immediately pull out his phone. She's heading out alone, he said quietly. I need eyes on her now. Full protection detail, but keep your distance. If anything happens to her. The threat hung unfinished, but the person on the other end clearly understood. As Alina walked the streets of Chicago, trying to clear her head, she had no idea that she was being watched by at least 6 different people, some protecting her, and some with far more sinister intentions. The game was getting more dangerous, and she was still completely unaware that she was even playing. 3 days after her confrontation with Dominic, Alina began noticing things that didn't add up. Small things at first, inconsistencies that might have been explainable if she hadn't already been looking for them. It started when she decided to do laundry. Digging through Dominic's jacket pockets to check for loose change, she found a money clip containing $500 bills. Not the kind of cash a homeless man typically carried around. When she asked him about it, he shrugged. I told you I had some savings. $2,500 is more than some savings for someone living in subsidized housing. Lucky poker game, he said, not meeting her eyes. The next day, while Dominic was in the shower, Alina noticed his phone buzzing on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a text from someone named Vincent. The Torino situation has been handled. Awaiting further orders. Orders? What kind of odd jobs involved giving and receiving orders? She tried to bring it up casually. Your friend Vincent texted. Something about a Torino situation? Dominic's face went completely blank. Wrong number probably. But she'd seen his name at the top of the message thread. The strangest incident happened when they were walking back from the grocery store. A man in an expensive suit was coming out of a restaurant across the street. When he spotted Dominic, his eyes went wide, and he actually started to bow before catching himself and hurrying away. Did that man just bow to you? Alina asked, staring after the retreating figure. What?
No.
You're seeing things. But she wasn't seeing things. And the more she watched, the more she noticed. The way people stepped aside when Dominic walked past. The way shopkeepers refused his money, insisting his purchases were on the house, the way he seemed to know exactly which streets to avoid and which routes were safest. Most telling of all was the apartment itself. Now that she was really looking, Alina could see that beneath the shabby exterior, there were expensive touches everywhere. The broken television was actually a high-end model with the brand name carefully scratched off. The kitchen knives were professional grade. The mattress in the bedroom was memory foam that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Dominic, she said one morning, finding him making coffee with beans that definitely hadn't come from the corner bodega. We need to talk. About what? About who you really are. He froze, the coffee mug halfway to his lips. What do you mean? I mean the expensive watch you think I haven't noticed under those torn sleeves. The way you move like you've had combat training. The fact that half the people in this neighborhood seem to know you, and the other half seem afraid of you. You have an active imagination.
Do I?
Then explain the custom-tailored clothes hidden in the back of your closet. Explain the encrypted phone I found in your sock drawer. Explain why a homeless man has a Swiss bank account number written on a piece of paper in his wallet. Dominic set down his coffee very carefully. You went through my things. You're damn right I did. And you know what I found? Evidence that you're not who you claim to be. Evidence that this whole setup, the apartment, the clothes, the homeless act, it's all fake. Alina, are you even really homeless? Or is this all some elaborate con? Are you working with Marcus? Is this whole thing? I'm not working with Marcus, Dominic said sharply, the first real emotion he'd shown all week. Then who are you working with? Because you're definitely working with someone. Before Dominic could answer, there was a knock at the door. Not the casual knock of a neighbor, but the sharp, authoritative rap of someone who expected to be obeyed immediately. Dominic's whole demeanor changed. He moved to the window, peered out, and she saw his jaw clench. Stay here, he ordered, heading for the door. Don't tell me what to do. But she stayed anyway, curiosity overriding indignation. Through the thin walls, she could hear voices, Dominic's and another man's, speaking in low, urgent tones. She caught fragments. The Castellano problem, territory dispute, need your decision. When Dominic came back, his expression was carefully neutral again.
Who was that? She asked.
Building maintenance. Building maintenance discussing territory disputes. You must have misheard. That night, as Dominic slept on the couch, Alina called Marcus from the bedroom. You were right, she whispered. Something's not right about him. Thank God you're finally seeing it, Marcus said, relief evident in his voice. Alina, you need to get out of there. Tonight. I can't just leave. We're married. We can get it annulled. Mental duress, fraud, any lawyer would take the case. This Dominic, whoever he really is, he's been lying to you from day 1.
But why?
What would he want from me? Think about it. You're a Carter. Your family has construction contracts all over the city, connections with city planning, access to development deals worth millions. Maybe he's working for a rival company. Maybe he's part of some organized crime family trying to muscle in on legitimate business. The word sent ice through Alina's veins. Organized crime. It would explain everything, the money, the secrecy, the way people reacted to him. What do I do? She asked. Come stay with me. Just temporarily, until we can figure this out. I know you don't trust me, but at least you know what my motives are. This man, you have no idea what he's capable of. After she hung up, Alina lay in the dark, her mind racing. Everything Marcus said made sense. She'd married a complete stranger, a man who'd lied to her about everything from his living situation to his financial status. But the worst part was the growing certainty that she'd traded one manipulative relationship for another, except this time, the stakes might be deadly. In the living room, Dominic stared at the ceiling, knowing she'd made a call but unable to hear the details. He could feel her pulling away, could sense that his carefully constructed cover was crumbling. He'd known this moment would come eventually. The question was, when she learned the truth about who he really was, would there be any chance of explaining why he deceived her? Or would she run straight into the arms of the very people who wanted to destroy them both? The next morning, Alina made her decision. She packed the few belongings she'd accumulated over the past 2 weeks into a small bag and waited for Dominic to leave for one of his mysterious errands. I'm going to grab some air, she told him when he headed for the door. Maybe walk around the neighborhood. Something flickered in his eyes. Suspicion. Maybe concern. I'll come with you. Dominic, please. I need some space to think. Just an hour. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. Stay close to the building. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me immediately. I will. As soon as he was gone, Alina grabbed her bag and headed for the stairwell. She'd called Marcus 20 minutes ago, asking him to pick her up 3 blocks away. She felt guilty about sneaking out, but the lies and secrecy had become suffocating. She made it 2 blocks before she realized she was being followed. 3 men in dark suits had materialized from nowhere, maintaining a careful distance, but clearly tracking her movements. At first, she assumed they were Dominic's people. Maybe he'd been having her watched all along. But something about their positioning felt wrong, predatory rather than protective. Alina quickened her pace, her heart hammering against her ribs. The meeting spot with Marcus was just one more block away. If she could just make it there. A black SUV pulled up to the curb beside her, and her blood turned to ice. This wasn't Marcus's car. "Mrs. Russo," said a voice from the passenger window. "Get in the car." "I don't think so," she said, backing away. The man stepped out, tall, heavy-set, with dead eyes and a gun poorly concealed beneath his jacket. That wasn't a request. Alina turned to run, but the three men from behind had closed the distance. She was surrounded in broad daylight on a busy Chicago street, and nobody seemed to notice or care. "Please," she whispered as rough hands grabbed her arms. "I don't have any money with me." "This isn't about money, sweetheart," the leader said, forcing her toward the SUV. "This is about sending a message to your husband." They shoved her into the back seat, and one of them slid in beside her while another took the wheel. The SUV pulled away from the curb smoothly, just another car in Chicago traffic. "Who are you?" Alina demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "People your husband is wronged," the man beside her said. "People who've been waiting a long time for the right leverage." "You've made a mistake. My husband is nobody. He's just..." The man laughed, a harsh sound that made her skin crawl. "Nobody? Lady, your husband is Dominic Russo. He runs half the South Side, controls more territory than any boss since the old days. And he's been making life very difficult for people like us." Alina stared at him, the words not computing. "That's impossible. He's homeless, he's the most dangerous man in Chicago. And you're about to be the reason he burns the city down to get you back." They drove for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, ending up in an abandoned warehouse near the docks. The smell of rust and decay filled the air as they dragged her inside. The space was mostly empty except for some old shipping containers and a single chair positioned in the center of the concrete floor. They zip-tied her hands behind her back and left her there with two guards while the leader made a phone call. "We have her," she heard him say. "Yeah, the wife. Tell Russo if he wants her back, he needs to evacuate his territory by midnight. All of it. And we want compensation for the Torino brothers." Alina's mind reeled. Territory? Compensation? The Torino brothers. Wasn't that the name she'd seen in the text on Dominic's phone? "You're insane if you think he'll give up anything for me," she called out, surprised by her own boldness. "We barely know each other." It was a marriage of convenience. The leader ended his call and walked over to her, crouching down so they were eye level. "You really don't know, do you?" he said almost pityingly. "Lady, your husband has been in love with you since the night you married him. Our intel says he's had you under 24-hour protection, turned down 3 major deals because they would have taken him out of the city, and killed 2 men who made threats against you." "That's not possible," Alina whispered. "We'll see. If I'm wrong, you'll be dead by morning. If I'm right," he smiled coldly. "Well, let's just say Dominic Russo doesn't negotiate when it comes to people he cares about." They waited. Minutes crawled by like hours. Alina tried to process what she'd been told, but it seemed too incredible to believe. Dominic, a crime boss? The quiet man who made her coffee every morning and insisted on walking her to the corner store. Then she heard it, the distant sound of engines. Multiple engines, getting closer. The guards straightened, hands moving to their weapons. "Showtime," one of them muttered. The warehouse doors exploded inward. What happened next was like something out of an action movie. Men in tactical gear poured through every entrance, the main doors, side entrances, even rappelling through skylights. Professional, coordinated, deadly. And leading them was Dominic. Except this wasn't the Dominic she knew. This man moved with lethal precision, barking orders in a voice that commanded instant obedience. He wore all black, carried weapons like he'd been born with them, and his eyes held a cold fury that made her kidnapper's threats seem like playground taunts. Nobody moves, nobody dies unnecessarily, his voice echoed through the warehouse. But if anyone so much as breathes wrong near my wife, I'll make sure you live long enough to regret it. The leader who'd been so confident minutes before now looked terrified. Russo, we can make a deal. The only deal, Dominic said, his gun trained on the man's head, is that you tell me who sent you before I put a bullet in your brain. It was Castellano. Vincent Castellano. He said you'd gone soft, that the girl was making you weak. Dominic's expression didn't change, but somehow he became even more frightening. Vincent was wrong. She doesn't make me weak. She makes me absolutely ruthless. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. Within minutes, it was over. Alina's restraints were cut, and she was lifted gently to her feet by the man she'd thought she knew. Are you hurt? Dominic asked, his hands careful as they checked her for injuries. The cold killer from moments before was gone, replaced by desperate concern. I'm fine, she managed. But you, who are you? Dominic looked into her eyes, and she saw the moment he made his decision. I'm Dominic Russo, he said quietly. And I'm the head of the most powerful crime family in Chicago. I've been lying to you since the night we met, and I'm sorrier for that than you'll ever know. As his men efficiently cleaned up the scene around them, Alina stared at her husband, this stranger who just declared war on his enemies to save her life, and realized that everything she thought she knew had been an elaborate, carefully constructed lie. The question was, what else had been a lie? And more importantly, what was real? Back at what Alina now realized was Dominic's safe house rather than a rundown apartment, she sat on the couch that she'd learned cost more than her car, staring at the man she'd married. The shabby clothes were gone, replaced by an expensive black suit that fit him perfectly. He looked like what he was, powerful, dangerous, and completely out of her league. How much of it was a lie? She asked quietly. Dominic sat across from her, maintaining distance like he was afraid she might bolt. Most of it. The homeless thing, the apartment, the whole helpless act. All fabricated. Why? I was supposed to be meeting with a contact that night. Someone had been trying to set up a hit on me, and I was using the homeless disguise to move around the city undetected. He ran a hand through his hair. Then you came running down that street in your wedding dress, declaring you'd marry the first man you saw. And you thought, what? That I'd be useful somehow? At first, maybe. His dark eyes met hers. Your family's construction company has contracts all over my territory. Your father's been unknowingly building on land I control for years. Having a connection to Carter Construction could have been advantageous. The words hit her like a physical blow. So it was all calculated. Just like Marcus. No, the sharpness in his voice made her look up. It was calculated for about 5 minutes. Then you kissed me in that courthouse, and you looked at me like I was someone worth saving instead of someone to be afraid of, and everything changed. I don't believe you. Dominic pulled out his phone and scrolled through what looked like text messages. 3 days after we were married, Vincent Castellano, the man who had you kidnapped, offered me $2 million for information about Carter Construction's upcoming projects. I turned him down. He showed her the message thread. She could see Dominic's response. The Carter business is off limits. Find another angle. A week later, the Torino brothers wanted to use one of your father's construction sites to move product. Easy money, no risk to me. I said no. Another message thread. Another refusal. Last month, I turned down the biggest deal of my career because it would have required me to leave Chicago for 6 months. I couldn't leave you unprotected that long. Alina stared at the evidence of his choices, her mind spinning. You're telling me you've been protecting me this whole time? From the moment you became my wife, he set the phone aside. The break-in at the apartment? Those weren't random burglars looking for valuables. They were Castellano's men, searching for anything they could use against you or your family. The men following you, the threatening phone calls, I made sure they all stopped. By killing people. By making it clear that touching you meant war with me, his expression was unapologetic. And yes, When warnings weren't enough, I eliminated the threats permanently. Alina felt sick. How many people have died because of me? Because of your ex-fiancé and stepsister's greed, you mean? She looked up sharply. What does that mean? Dominic's jaw tightened. There's something else you need to know. Marcus and Emma, they weren't just planning to steal your family's company. They were working with Castellano. That's impossible. Is it? Think about it, Alina. How did Marcus know so much about my background? How did he know which questions to ask to make you doubt me? How did Castellano's men know exactly when and where to grab you today? The pieces clicked together in her mind with horrible clarity. Marcus told them I was leaving. He's been feeding them information for weeks. Your movements, your schedule, your state of mind. They needed you isolated and scared so you'd run straight to them when the pressure got too intense. Alina felt the room spinning. Why would Marcus work with criminals? Because Carter Construction is worth more than just the company assets. Your father owns land all over the South Side, land that's about to be rezoned for major development. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in potential value. And if Marcus married me, he'd inherit everything when your father passes. But that wasn't enough for him. He wanted to control the criminal enterprises operating on that land, too. A partnership with Castellano would have made him one of the most powerful men in Chicago, legitimate business on the surface, organized crime underneath. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Marcus had done to her personally. They were going to turn my family's legacy into a criminal empire. And they were willing to have you killed to do it. Dominic's voice was gentle but relentless. The kidnapping today? That wasn't just about getting to me. Castellano's orders were to eliminate you after they'd gotten what they wanted. You were never supposed to survive this. Alina buried her face in her hands. Emma knew. My own stepsister was willing to have me murdered for money. I'm sorry, and he did sound genuinely sorry. I know how much family means to you. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I needed proof, and because he hesitated. Because I was afraid you'd run. And I couldn't protect you if you ran. She looked up at him through her tears. Protect me or control me? Both, he admitted. I'm not going to lie to you anymore, Alina. I'm a possessive, controlling bastard who's used to getting his way through force and intimidation. But what I feel for you, that's real. That was never part of any plan. What you feel for me. Dominic moved to kneel in front of her, his hands careful as they framed her face. I love you. I've loved you since you looked at me in that courthouse, like I was your salvation instead of your downfall. I love your strength, your fire, the way you refuse to be anyone's victim. I love that you married a stranger to spite your enemies and ended up saving us both.
Dominic.
I know I don't deserve you. I know I've lied and manipulated and made choices that no decent man would make. But I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that everything I've done, I did to protect you. And if I can't, if this is all too much, then I'll let you go, he said simply. I'll make sure you're safe. I'll make sure Marcus and Emma never touch your family's business, and I'll disappear from your life forever. Alina searched his face, looking for any sign of deception. All she saw was raw honesty and a vulnerability that he'd never shown before. The man I married in that courthouse, she said slowly. The one who agreed to help a stranger without asking for anything in return. Was any of that real? That was the most real I've ever been with anyone, he said. Everything else was a performance, but that moment, that was just me, choosing to help someone who needed saving. For the first time since the warehouse, Alina felt like she could breathe. Then maybe we can figure this out. The relief that crossed his features was so intense it was almost painful to watch. We're still going to have to deal with Marcus and Emma, she said. And your enemies. And the fact that I'm apparently married to a crime boss. Together, Dominic said firmly. We'll deal with all of it together. As he pulled her into his arms, Alina realized that for the first time in months, she felt truly safe. Not because she was naive about who Dominic was, but because she finally understood exactly what lengths he'd go to protect her. The question now was, what lengths would she go to protect him? 2 days later, Alina walked into the Ritz-Carlton ballroom where her engagement party had taken place just 3 weeks earlier. This time, however, she wasn't the naive socialite in a designer dress. She wore a simple black suit, carried a recording device, and had the backing of the most dangerous man in Chicago. Marcus and Emma were waiting in the hotel's private meeting room, along with Vincent Castellano, though they didn't know Dominic's men had already surrounded the building. Alina, Marcus stood as she entered, his handsome face creased with what looked like genuine concern. Thank God you're safe. When we heard about the kidnapping. You heard about it because you orchestrated it, Alina said calmly, taking a seat across from them. Emma's perfectly made-up face went pale. What are you talking about? I'm talking about your partnership with Mr. Castellano here. Alina nodded toward the older man who'd been sitting silently in the corner. I'm talking about your plan to steal Carter Construction and turn it into a front for organized crime. Marcus laughed, but there was desperation in it. Alina, you're being paranoid. That animal you married has obviously filled your head with conspiracy theories. The animal I married saved my life, Alina interrupted. After your business partners tried to murder me, I would never. Hurt me? Really? Alina pulled out her phone and played a recording. Her own voice filled the room. Marcus called. He said you were leaving to meet him 3 blocks from the apartment. Then another voice, one of Castellano's men. Perfect. We'll grab her before she gets there. Make it look like a random kidnapping. And finally, Marcus's voice. Just make sure she doesn't survive to cause problems later. I can't have her coming back to ruin everything once I inherit the company. The room went dead silent. You recorded our phone calls? Emma whispered. Dominic's people have been monitoring all communications since the threat started, Alina said. We have everything. Every meeting, every phone call, every plan you made to destroy my family. Castellano started to rise from his chair, his hand moving toward what was probably a weapon, but froze when the door opened. Dominic walked in, followed by 3 of his men. He looked relaxed, almost casual, but Alina could see the deadly tension coiled in his movements. Mr. Castellano, Dominic said pleasantly, I believe we have some business to discuss. Russo, Castellano's voice was carefully controlled. This is a private meeting. Involving my wife. That makes it my business. Marcus stood up straighter, trying to project confidence. Look, whatever misunderstanding there's been. Misunderstanding. Dominic's voice was soft, which somehow made it more terrifying. You conspired to have my wife kidnapped and murdered. You planned to steal her family's company and use it to launder money for my enemies. You've been lying to her for months, while planning to destroy everything she cares about. He paused, his dark eyes fixed on Marcus. Which part of that is a misunderstanding? The girl married you to spite me, Marcus said desperately. It's not real. She doesn't actually care about you. I care enough to choose him, Alina interrupted, standing up. I care enough to stand by him as his equal and help him bring down everyone who tried to hurt us. She walked over to Dominic's side, and he immediately wrapped a protective arm around her waist. This is what's going to happen, Alina continued, her voice steady and strong. Marcus, you're going to sign a confession detailing your attempted fraud and your conspiracy with Castellano. Emma, you're going to return every piece of information you stole from Carter Construction and resign from any position that gives you access to family business. And if we refuse? Emma asked defiantly. Alina smiled, and there was something of Dominic's predatory nature in it. Then my husband and I will release all the evidence we've gathered to the FBI, the IRS, and every major news outlet in Chicago. Your pharmaceutical company will be investigated for its money laundering activities, and you'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison. You can't prove. We can prove everything, Dominic said quietly. Bank records, wire transfers, recorded conversations. We have enough evidence to bury all of you. Castellano finally spoke up. What about our arrangement, Russo? You eliminate my competition. I stay out of your territory. The arrangement was contingent on you not touching my family, Dominic replied. You broke that agreement when you went after my wife. Now you get to live with the consequences. Which are, you leave Chicago. Tonight. You never come back, and you never contact anyone connected to me or my wife again. In return, I let you live. The threat was delivered so matter-of-factly that it took a moment to sink in. When it did, Castellano's face went white. And if I refuse? Dominic's smile was cold as winter. Then you don't leave Chicago alive. Within an hour, it was over. Marcus and Emma signed their confessions. Castellano agreed to disappear, and the threat to Alina and her family was eliminated. As they watched their enemies leave the hotel under the watchful eyes of Dominic's men, Alina felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. So what happens now? She asked as they stood alone in the empty meeting room. Now we go home, Dominic said, pulling her close. We figure out how to blend your world with mine. We protect your family's business and make sure no one ever threatens you again. And us. Us, he said, cupping her face in his hands. We start over. No more lies, no more secrets, no more pretending to be people we're not. I'm still going to need time to adjust to being married to a crime boss, Alina admitted. And I'm going to need time to adjust to having a wife who's not afraid to walk into a room full of dangerous men and threaten them, Dominic replied with a grin. Think we can make it work? Instead of answering with words, Dominic kissed her, deeply, passionately, with all the love and devotion he'd been holding back for weeks. When they finally broke apart, Alina smiled. I'll take that as a yes. As they walked out of the hotel together, Alina realized that what had started as an impulsive act of defiance had become something neither of them had expected, a real marriage, built on truth, trust, and the kind of fierce loyalty that could withstand anything their enemies threw at them. She was no longer the naive socialite who'd believed in fairy tale endings. And Dominic was no longer the man who solved all his problems with violence and intimidation. Together, they were something new, a partnership between equals who'd chosen love over safety, truth over comfortable lies, and each other over everyone else in the world. The Carter construction heiress and the Chicago crime boss. It wasn't the love story anyone would have predicted, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect.